please, somebody help us. My wife, she's dying." The words tore through the frozen night air like a gunshot. Walter Callahan collapsed onto his knees in the snow outside the clubhouse, his wife's limp body cradled against his chest. Through the frosted windows, shadowy figures stopped mid-motion beer bottles, suspended halfway to lips, pool cues frozen above felt tables. The old man's face was a mask of desperation, tears freezing on his weathered cheeks as Dorothy's lips turned blue in his arms. Before we dive into this incredible story, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to hear will restore your faith in humanity. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Stick with me until the end, because the twist in this tale will leave you speechless. The temperature had dropped to 8 degrees below zero when Walter felt Dorothy's knees buckle beneath her. They'd been walking for 3 hours since their '98 Ford pickup had wheezed its last breath on Route 47, steam billowing from under the hood like a dying dragon. The heater had given out first, then the engine followed, leaving them stranded on a back road where cell service was a fantasy and passing cars were rarer than summer snow. Walter, I can't feel my legs anymore." Dorothy whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind that whipped through the pine trees lining the frozen highway. Walter's heart lurched. He'd fought in Korea, survived Chosin Reservoir, where men froze standing up, their weapons fused to their hands by ice. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had ever terrified him like the sound of his wife's voice fading to nothing. "You stay with me, Dot. You hear me? We didn't come this far to quit now." His own fingers were numb inside his worn gloves, his boots crunching through snow that had drifted knee-deep in places. "That clubhouse can't be more than another mile. I saw the sign back at the junction." Dorothy's response was a barely perceptible nod. Her face had taken on a waxy pallor that made Walter's stomach twist. The cancer had already stolen so much from her energy, her appetite, the rose gold color that used to bloom in her cheeks when she laughed. Now hypothermia was reaching for what little remained. "Tell me about the beach house again," Dorothy murmured, her words slurring together. "The one we stayed at when Tommy was little." Walter felt panic flood his veins. She was trying to distract herself from the cold, from the pain, from the very real possibility that they might not make it. "The one in Oceanside with the blue shutters. Thomas built that sandcastle. Took him all afternoon. And you took about 100 pictures of it," Walter said, forcing cheerfulness into his voice, even as Dorothy stumbled again. He caught her, his arthritic shoulder screaming in protest as he took more of her weight. "You made him pose next to it like he'd built the Taj Mahal." A faint smile crossed Dorothy's face, then vanished as quickly as it had come. He was so proud. Why did everything go so wrong, Walter? The question landed like a physical blow. 7 years. 7 years since they'd spoken to their son. 7 years since Thomas had slammed the door of their home in Millbrook and never looked back. The argument echoed in Walter's memory even now. Accusations shouted unforgivable words, hurled like grenades, the sound of Thomas's truck peeling out of the driveway at 2 in the morning. "We're fixing it, Dot. That's what this trip is about, remember? We're going to see Tommy. We're going to meet our grandson." Walter's voice cracked on the last word. Dorothy had only learned about the P 3 months ago, a brief mention in a letter from Thomas's ex-wife, Sarah. A photograph had been included, a tow-headed 7-year-old with Thomas's stubborn chin and Dorothy's gentle eyes. The cancer diagnosis had come 2 weeks later. Stage 4, inoperable, 6 months, maybe less. Dorothy had looked at Walter across the kitchen table, that photograph clutched in her shaking hands, and said 5 words, "I need to see him." So they'd started driving. From Millbrook, Illinois, towards Silver Falls, Montana, where Sarah's letter had been postmarked. 1,300 miles with a dying woman and a truck that was already 26 years old when they started. Walter had known it was crazy. He'd known it was dangerous. But when Dorothy looked at him with those eyes, the same eyes that had convinced him to marry her in 1967, to buy that first house, to believe that life could be beautiful, even when it was hard, he couldn't say no. He'd never been able to say no to Dorothy. Now, as she sagged against him, her breathing shallow and rapid, Walter wondered if his inability to refuse her had finally killed them both. The wind picked up driving snow into his face like needles. Through the blur of white, he could make out a glow in the distance, artificial light spilling from windows, the promise of warmth. The clubhouse. It had to be. "Almost there, sweetheart. Just a little further." Dorothy didn't respond. Her eyes had closed, her head lolling against his shoulder. Walter's pulse hammered in his throat. He'd read about hypothermia in his veterans magazines, knew the stages, confusion, slurred speech, drowsiness. The final stage was the worst paradoxical undressing, they called it, when victims became so disoriented they'd tear off their clothes despite freezing to death, their brains too damaged to register reality. Dorothy, open your eyes. He shook her gently, then harder when she didn't respond. Dorothy Ann Callahan, you open your eyes right now. Her eyelids fluttered. Tired, Walter. So tired. I know, baby, I know. But you gotta stay awake for me. Can you do that? Can you stay awake? She didn't answer. Her full weight was on him now, 108 pounds that felt like 800. Walter's legs trembled with each step. His own body was shutting down, he could feel it. His toes had gone numb an hour ago. His fingers weren't much better. The old shrapnel wound in his left thigh was screaming the cold, making the metal fragments that doctors had never been able to fully remove feel like they were grinding against bone. But he kept walking, one foot in front of the other, left, right, the military cadence he'd learned 53 years ago, marching through snow in a country that wasn't his own, fighting a war he'd never fully understood. At least then he'd had boots that fit and a rifle to keep him warm. Now all he had was Dorothy growing colder by the second and a desperate hope that anyone would help them. The clubhouse materialized out of the blizzard like a mirage. Low-slung building, log construction motorcycles lined up outside covered in snow like sleeping metal beasts. A neon sign buzzed over the door. Devil's Backbone MC. Below it in smaller letters, members only. Walter had never been near a motorcycle club in his life. The news stories about the Hells Angels, about gang violence and drug trafficking played at the edges of his consciousness. But Dorothy was dying in his arms, and the clubhouse was the only light for miles. He staggered toward the door. Through the frosted windows, he could see movement men in leather vests, women with long hair, the flicker of a television in the corner. Music thumped from inside bass notes that made the windows rattle. Walter tried the door. Locked. Of course it was locked. He pounded on it with his fist, the impact sending jolts of pain through his frozen knuckles. Help! Please, somebody, help us. Nothing. The music was too loud. They couldn't hear him. Walter looked down at Dorothy. Her face had gone slack, her breathing so shallow he had to press his ear to her mouth to confirm she was still alive. Terror gave him strength he didn't know he possessed. He hammered on the door again harder, using both fists, putting his whole body into it. Please, my wife is dying, somebody help us. Inside, the music cut off. Footsteps approached the door. Walter felt a surge of hope, so intense it made him dizzy. The door opened a crack. A man's face appeared in the gap, hard features, graying beard eyes that had seen things Walter could only imagine. A leather vest with patches. Devil's Backbone, MC Sergeant at Arms. The man looked at Walter, then at Dorothy in his arms, and his expression didn't change. Private property, the man said. Members only. Please, Walter gasped. My wife hypothermia. We need help. There's a hospital in Copper Ridge, 30 miles north. The man started to close the door. Walter's hand shot out, stopping it. She won't make it 30 miles. Look at her. Look at her. The man's eyes dropped to Dorothy. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered in those hard features. Then his face closed off again. Not our problem, old man. Move your hand. I'm begging you. Walter's voice broke. His knees were giving out. He could feel himself starting to fall, Dorothy's weight pulling them both down. Please, I'm begging. His legs buckled. Walter crashed to his knees in the snow, still clutching Dorothy against his chest. The impact sent shockwaves of pain through his body, but he barely registered it. All he could think about was Dorothy's face blue-tinged and still her breath coming in tiny puffs of vapor that grew fainter with each second. Please, he whispered one more time. Please help us. The door hung open. The man stood there frozen. Behind him, other faces appeared, more leather vests, more hard eyes, men and women who looked like they'd carved their lives out of stone and steel. They stared at the old couple in the snow like they were watching a movie, something that was happening to someone else in some other world. None of them moved. Walter felt something inside him break, not his body that had already broken miles ago. This was deeper. This was the part of him that had survived war and loss and 7 years of not speaking to his son. The part that had held on to hope even when Dorothy's diagnosis had stolen their future. That part crumbled like sand. We just want to see our grandson, he heard himself say. Tears were streaming down his face now, freezing in his beard. That's all. We just want to see our boy's boy before she, he couldn't finish. The words dissolved into sobs that racked his entire body. He bent over Dorothy, sheltering her from the wind, with his own body knowing it wouldn't be enough. Knowing that in a few minutes, or maybe a few hours, someone would find them frozen together in the parking lot of a biker bar, died, trying to reach a son who might not even want to see them. Jesus Christ. The voice came from inside the clubhouse, different from the first man, younger, rougher around the edges. Walter looked up through his tears to see a massive figure pushing through the crowd at the door. 6'4", at least maybe 250 pounds, with a beard that hung halfway down his chest and arms covered in tattoos. His vest had different patches, a road captain, Grizzly. The man Grizzly stepped out into the snow. He moved with surprising grace for someone his size, dropping to one knee beside Walter and Dorothy, his hands scarred and enormous, reached for Dorothy's throat, fingers seeking her pulse. "How long's she been out?" Grizzly demanded. "Few minutes, maybe more. I can't." "How far'd you walk?" 3 hours, maybe 4. The truck broke down on Route 47 and there was nobody. No cars, nothing. And I knew there was a building out here because I saw the sign and— "Shut up!" Grizzly's fingers were still on Dorothy's throat. His face was a mask of concentration. Pulse is thready, respiration shallow, skin's cold and waxy. He looked up at the crowd in the doorway. "Somebody get me every blanket we've got. Now." The crowd exploded into motion. The first man, the sergeant at arms, disappeared inside. Others followed, shouting orders Walter couldn't make out over the wind. Grizzly scooped Dorothy out of Walter's arms like she weighed nothing. "Can you stand, old man?" Walter tried. Failed. His legs had turned to rubber. Without hesitation, Grizzly jerked his head toward the clubhouse. "Axel, Tiny, get out here and help this guy inside." 2 more bikers emerged. They grabbed Walter under the arms, hauling him to his feet. His legs dragged uselessly as they carried him through the door into a blast of warmth that felt like walking into another dimension. The clubhouse interior was exactly what Walter had expected, and nothing like it at all. Pool table in the corner bar along one wall, Confederate and American flags hanging from exposed beams. But it was warm, gloriously, impossibly warm. And the men and women who'd stood frozen in the doorway moments ago were moving with the precision of a military unit. "Clear the pool table," Grizzly barked. "Get those balls out of the way." Hands swept the table clean. Grizzly laid Dorothy down on the green felt with surprising gentleness. Someone thrust blankets at him, quilts, sleeping bags, even what looked like someone's leather jacket. Grizzly began wrapping Dorothy like she was made of glass. "Space heater. Somebody get a space heater over here." A woman with purple hair and sleeve tattoos dragged a heater across the floor, plugging it in near the pool table. "Not too close, we warm her up gradually or we'll shock her system." Grizzly was shouting orders like a field commander. "Cheryl, get on the phone to Doc Matthews. I don't care if he's off the clock, tell him we need him here now. Axel, boil water, lots of it. We're going to need hot water bottles." The woman Cheryl was already on a cell phone, pacing near the bar. "Doc, yeah, it's Cheryl from Devil's Backbone. We got a situation? Hypothermia severe." Yeah, I know, but Doc, just get your ass out here." Walter stood swaying on his feet, supported by the 2 bikers who'd carried him inside. His brain couldn't process what was happening. These were Hell's Angels, or whatever they called themselves, Devil's Backbone. These were the people the news warned you about, the ones you crossed the street to avoid. But they were saving Dorothy's life. "You," Grizzly pointed at Walter without looking up from Dorothy. "What's your name?" "Walter. Walter Callahan." "Walter, when's the last time you ate?" Walter tried to remember. "Breakfast, maybe. I don't— Tiny, get this man some food. Soup if we got it. Something hot." Grizzly's hands were moving, constantly adjusting blankets, checking Dorothy's pulse, monitoring her breathing. "And get his boots off. Check for frostbite." The biker called Tiny, who was anything but tiny, easily 300 pounds, guided Walter to a chair near the space heater. Within seconds, someone thrust a bowl of soup into his hands. Chicken noodle steam rising from the surface. Walter's stomach lurched at the smell. "Drink," Tiny ordered. It wasn't a suggestion. Walter drank. The soup burned his throat, going down, but he barely noticed. His eyes were locked on Dorothy across the room. She looked so small on that pool table, swallowed by blankets, her face still that terrible waxy color. "Is she going to make it?" Walter whispered. Tiny didn't answer. He was unlacing Walter's boots with hands that seemed too big for the delicate task. When the boots came off, Walter heard Tiny suck in a breath. Grizzly, we got frostbite over here. Walter looked down. His toes were white and purple, the skin tight and shiny. He couldn't feel them at all. Grizzly glanced over, his face grim. How bad? Second degree, maybe worse. Couple of the toes look like third. Can't do anything about it right now. Keep him warm, get circulation going. We'll worry about his feet after the wife's stable. Grizzly turned back to Dorothy. Talk to me, Cheryl. Where's Doc? 10 minutes out. He's bringing his full kit. Good. Tell him we're going to need IV fluids warmed if possible. And tell him to bring his O2 tank. Walter watched this stranger, this biker with a face like weathered granite and hands like steel traps, work on his wife with the efficiency of a trained medic. How do you know how to do this? The question escaped before Walter could stop it. Grizzly's eyes flicked to him for a second. Army, 2 tours in Afghanistan. I was a combat medic before I was a mechanic. He went back to adjusting Dorothy's blankets. Now shut up and let me work. The front door banged open. A man in his 60s rushed in carrying a large medical bag and trailing snow. Gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, wearing a parka over what looked like pajamas. Where is she? Here, Doc. Grizzly stepped back, giving the doctor room to work. Doc Matthews moved to the pool table, his hands already reaching for Dorothy's wrist. He pressed his stethoscope to her chest, listened, frowned, pulled out a thermometer and slipped it under her tongue. The clubhouse had gone silent. Every person in the room was watching the doctor work. The only sounds were the hum of the space heater and Dorothy's shallow breathing. Doc Matthews pulled the thermometer out. His face went pale. 87 degrees. She's in severe hypothermia. He looked at Grizzly. How long? Don't know exactly. Husband says they were walking for 3, maybe 4 hours. Jesus. Doc was pulling supplies from his bag. IV kit bags of fluid portable oxygen tank. We need to get her to a hospital. She needs controlled rewarming cardiac monitoring. No hospitals. Grizzly's voice was flat. Doc Matthews froze. Excuse me. The nearest hospital is Copper Ridge. 30 miles in a blizzard with roads that aren't plowed. She wouldn't make it 10 miles. She might not make it here, Grizzly. This woman needs... She needs to not die in the next hour. Can you keep her alive or not? The two men stared at each other. The temperature in the room seemed to drop despite the heater. Walter felt his heart hammering in his chest. Finally, Doc Matthews looked away. I'll do what I can, but if she codes, if her heart stops, then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Grizzly stepped aside. Do your work, Doc. The doctor got to work inserting an IV with hands that shook slightly. The bag of fluids hung from a coat hook someone had hammered into the beam above the pool table. Oxygen tubing went under Dorothy's nose. Walter watched it all from his chair. Tiny still working on his feet, wrapping them in warm towels and massaging gently to restore circulation. The pain when it came was excruciating, like thousands of needles stabbing into his flesh simultaneously. He bit back a scream. That's good, Tiny said quietly. Pain means the tissue's still alive. It's when you don't feel nothing that you worry. Across the room, Doc Matthews was listening to Dorothy's heart again. He looked up at Grizzly and shook his head slightly. Heart rate's irregular. She's not out of the woods. Grizzly's jaw tightened. What do you need? A miracle would be nice. Doc adjusted the oxygen flow. Failing that, we keep her warm, keep her stable, and pray her heart doesn't give out. Walter tried to stand. I need to be with her. Tiny pushed him back down. You need to let the doc work, and you need to get your own core temperature up before you join your wife in hypothermia land. But no buts, old man. You're no good to her dead. The harsh words landed like slaps. Walter slumped back in the chair, tears streaming down his face again. He'd failed her. He'd failed Dorothy. His stupid pride, his desperate need to reconnect with Thomas before it was too late, had nearly killed the only person who'd ever truly loved him. A hand landed on his shoulder. Walter looked up to find Grizzly standing over him, his face unreadable. What's the story? Grizzly asked. And don't bullshit me. Where were you going? Why were you out on Route 47 in the middle of a blizzard? Walter swallowed hard. Silver Falls, Montana. We were going to see our son in the middle of winter in a truck that was clearly about to die. We didn't have a choice. The words came out broken. Dorothy has cancer. Stage 4, the doctor said, they said 6 months, maybe less. That was 4 months ago. Grizzly's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. And your son lives in Silver Falls. We think so. We haven't talked to him in 7 years. Walter's voice dropped to a whisper. We had a fight. A bad one. Things were said that shouldn't have been said. He left. Changed his number. We didn't know where he was until his ex-wife sent a letter 3 months ago. What did the letter say? That Thomas had a son, our grandson, 7 years old. We'd never met him. Walter looked at his wife, still and pale, on the pool table. When Dorothy got her diagnosis, all she wanted was to see the boy. Just once. Before he couldn't finish. Didn't need to. Grizzly was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the clubhouse had returned to a low murmur of activity. People checking on Dorothy, stoking the fire in the wood stove in the corner, making coffee. But there was a new tension in the air, a current running beneath the surface that Walter couldn't quite identify. What did you fight about? Grizzly asked finally. You and your son. Walter closed his eyes. Money, at least that's what started it. Thomas wanted to buy a business, a garage. He asked us for help with the down payment. We just retired and our savings were tight. We said no. He paused. But it wasn't really about the money. It was about control, about me thinking I knew better than him, about Dorothy trying to keep the peace and just making everything worse. It was about 25 years of little resentments and unspoken disappointments all coming out at once. What did he say when he left? Walter's voice cracked. He said he was done, that he'd spent his whole life trying to be good enough for us and he was tired of failing, that we could keep our money and our disappointment and he never wanted to see us again. The words hung in the air like smoke. Grizzly was silent, his massive arms crossed over his chest. I tried to call, Walter continued. For the first year, I must have called 100 times. Then the number was disconnected. I hired a private investigator, but he came up empty. It was like Thomas had just vanished. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Dorothy never gave up hope. She'd talk about him like he was just away on a trip, like he'd walk through the door any day. And then that letter came and there was a photo of this little boy who looked just like Thomas did at that age, and Dorothy she lit up. For the first time since the diagnosis, she had something to live for. So you got in a truck that was older than most of the bikes outside and drove into a blizzard? Yes. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, Grizzly said flatly. Walter's head snapped up, anger flaring. I know it was dumb. You think I don't know that, but what was I supposed to do? Watch her die without even trying. She's my wife. She's been my wife for 56 years, and if she wants to see our grandson before she goes, then God damn it, I'm going to make it happen. The outburst left him breathless. Around the clubhouse, conversations had stopped. Everyone was staring at him. Grizzly's expression still hadn't changed. You done? Walter deflated. Yeah, I'm done. Good. Because here's what's going to happen. Doc's going to try to stabilize your wife. Then we're going to get some real food into both of you, and you're going to sleep for a few hours. In the morning when the storm breaks, we're going to put you in a plane that's a car for you civilians, and we're going to drive you to Silver Falls. Walter blinked. What? You heard me. We're taking you to see your son. But why would you do that? For the first time, something like emotion crossed Grizzly's face. Because I got a son too, and I haven't talked to him in 3 years. And every day I wake up thinking today's the day I'm going to call him, and every day I find a reason not to. He looked at Dorothy. Your wife doesn't have the luxury of someday. Neither do you. So yeah, we're going to help you, because maybe if you can fix your mess, the rest of us can figure out how to fix ours. Walter felt something crack open in his chest, not breaking, but opening, like a door he'd kept locked for 7 years finally swinging wide. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just don't die on us. Grizzly turned to the room. You all hear that? We got a mission tomorrow. Walter and Dorothy Callahan are going to Silver Falls to see their family, and we're making damn sure they get there. Anybody got a problem with that? The clubhouse erupted, not in protest and agreement. Fists pounded on tables. Voices rose in a chorus of support. These hardened bikers, these men and women who looked like they'd been carved from granite and violence, rallied around two strangers like they were family. Walter wept. He couldn't help it. The relief, the exhaustion, the overwhelming gratitude, they all crashed over him at once, and he sobbed like a child while Tiny awkwardly patted his shoulder, and someone pressed another bowl of soup into his hands. Across the room, Doc Matthews was checking Dorothy's vitals again. He caught Grizzly's eye and gave a small nod. Not out of the woods yet, but stable. For now. Grizzly walked back to the pool table. He stood there for a moment looking down at Dorothy's still form, then reached out and adjusted her blankets one more time. "Hang in there, Mrs. Callahan," he said quietly. "You got a grandson to meet. Don't you dare check out before you see his face." And in that moment, watching this massive tattooed biker tend to his dying wife with hands that were gentle despite their scars, Walter understood something fundamental about the human heart. Kindness doesn't wear a uniform. It doesn't come with a resume or a background check. Sometimes it shows up in the most unlikely places, worn by the most unlikely people, offered when you least expect it and need it most. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows of Devil's Backbone MC Clubhouse. Inside, surrounded by strangers who were becoming something more, Walter Callahan finally allowed himself to hope. Dorothy's grandson was waiting in Silver Falls, and tomorrow, God willing, she was going to meet him. Dorothy's eyes opened at 4:47 a.m. Walter was slumped in a chair beside the pool table, half asleep, when he felt her hand twitch in his. His head snapped up so fast his neck cracked. "Dot." Her lips moved. No sound came out at first, just a whisper of breath. Walter leaned closer, his heart slamming against his ribs. "Where?" Dorothy's voice was barely audible. "Where are we?" "We're safe. We're somewhere safe." Walter's hand tightened around hers. "You're going to be okay." Her eyes, still glassy with the confusion, drifted around the room. The clubhouse was dim now, most of the overhead lights turned off. A few bikers were crashed on couches in the corner. The space heater still hummed beside the pool table, and Dorothy was buried under what looked like every blanket the clubhouse owned. I can't remember. The truck broke down, we walked, you collapsed. These people, these bikers, they saved your life." Dorothy's gaze found his face. Even exhausted, even half-conscious, she could read him like a book. "You're crying." Walter hadn't realized he was. He wiped his eyes with his free, not letting go of her with the other. "I thought I lost you." "Not yet." The faintest smile crossed her lips. Still got a grandson to meet." Before Walter could respond, footsteps approached. Grizzly appeared out of the shadows, moving quietly for such a large man. He'd been sleeping on one of the couches, still fully dressed, boots and all. "She's awake." It wasn't a question. "Just now," Walter said. Grizzly moved to the other side of the pool table, his eyes scanning Dorothy with the same clinical precision he had shown hours earlier. "Mrs. Callahan, can you tell me your full name?" Dorothy's brow furrowed. Dorothy Ann Callahan." "What year is it?" 2000 and..." She paused, thinking. 26. "Good. You know where you are?" "Somewhere I probably shouldn't be." Her voice was getting stronger. "Biker bar." A smile tugged at the corner of Grizzly's mouth. "Close enough. You gave us quite a scare." "I gave myself quite a scare." Dorothy tried to sit up. The movement made her wince, and Grizzly's hand shot out, steadying her. "It's easy. You've been through hell. Doc Matthews said you need to take it slow." "How slow? We have to get to Silver Falls?" "Doc's coming back at 6 to check on you again. If he clears you, we leave at 7. Dorothy's eyes widened. You didn't think we'd send you back out there alone, did you?" Grizzly crossed his arms. "Storm's supposed to break around dawn. Roads will still be a mess, but we've got vehicles that can handle it. And we've got people who know every back road between here and Montana." "You don't have to do this," Walter said, even though the thought of trying to make the journey alone made his chest tight with fear. "Yeah, we do." Grizzly's voice was flat, brooking no argument. "Now both of you need to get some real sleep. We've got about 90 minutes before Doc shows up. Use them." He walked away before either of them could protest. Walter watched him go, then looked back at Dorothy. Her eyes were already starting to close again. "Walter?" "Yeah, these are good people." "Yeah," Walter whispered. "I think they are." At 6:15 a.m., Doc Matthews declared Dorothy stable enough to travel. At 6:47, the clubhouse exploded into organized chaos. "Axel, get the Suburban running and check the tire chains." Grizzly's voice cut through the early morning air like a whip. "Cheryl, I need those supply bags, packed food, water, blankets, first aid kit. Tiny, you're driving the chase vehicle. Take the F250. Walter stood near the door, bundled in a parka someone had loaned him, watching the Devil's Backbone MC transform into something that looked disturbingly like a military convoy preparing for deployment. 6 vehicles were being loaded in the parking lot, 2 pickup trucks the suburban Grizzly had mentioned, and 3 SUVs that had seen better days but looked like they could drive through a brick wall. Dorothy sat in a wheelchair someone had produced from God knows where, also wrapped in borrowed winter gear. Her color was better, but she still looked fragile. Doc Matthews hovered nearby, checking her pulse every few minutes, like he expected her to flatline at any moment. "This is insane," the doctor muttered. "She should be in a hospital." "She should be in Silver Falls," Dorothy corrected him. Her voice was weak but determined. "And if these people are willing to help us get there, I'm not arguing." A woman with purple hair, Cheryl Walter remembered, appeared with 2 paper bags, breakfast sandwiches, egg and sausage, and coffee. She thrust the bags at Walter. "You're going to need your strength." "Thank you. Really, I don't know how to—" "Don't." Cheryl's face was hard, but her eyes were kind. "Just get to your son. That's thanks enough." Grizzly emerged from the clubhouse carrying what looked like a tactical radio. He barked something at Axel, who was already in the driver's seat of the Suburban, then turned to survey the parking lot. His gaze landed on Walter and Dorothy. "You two ready?" "As we'll ever be," Walter said. "Good. You're riding in the Suburban with me and Axel. Doc's coming too, just in case. The others will run interference, 1 truck ahead, 1 behind, SUVs flanking. If we hit trouble, we've got backup." "What kind of trouble are you expecting?" Dorothy asked. Grizzly's expression was grim. "The kind that happens when you drive through a blizzard's aftermath on back roads that aren't maintained. Down trees, rock slides, ice patches that'll flip a vehicle before you know what hit you. Plus, we're going through territory where Devil's Backbone isn't exactly welcome." Walter felt his stomach drop. "What do you mean?" "Means there's another club up North Iron Cross, MC. We've got history, bad history. Their territory starts about 50 miles from here, and Silver Falls is right in the middle of it." Grizzly's jaw tightened. "But they're not going to stop us. Nothing's going to stop us." "Understood?" It wasn't a question, it was a promise. At 7 o'clock sharp, the convoy rolled out. Walter sat in the back seat of the Suburban, Dorothy beside him with her head on his shoulder. Doc Matthews rode shotgun, his medical bag clutched in his lap. Axel drove with the steady confidence of someone who'd navigated worse roads in worse conditions. Grizzly sat behind Axel, the tactical radio in his hand, and calling out updates to the other vehicles. "Lead truck, what's your visual?" The radio crackled. "Road's clear for now, Grizz. Visibility's maybe quarter mile. Snow's still coming down, but it's lighter." "Copy that. Maintain the speed at 40. Don't outrun your headlights." The landscape outside was a white nightmare. Snow had drifted across the highway in places, creating obstacles that forced Axel to navigate carefully. The plow trucks hadn't made it out here yet, might not make it for days. The convoy was on its own. Dorothy stirred against Walter's shoulder. "How far to Silver Falls?" 160 miles, Grizzly said without turning around. 4 hours in good conditions. Today 6, maybe 7, maybe more if we hit complications. "We'll make it," Dorothy said softly. "We have to." Nobody responded to that. The Suburban's heater blasted warm air, but Walter still felt cold. Not from the temperature, from the weight of everything riding on this journey. They were asking these strangers to risk their lives, their vehicles, their safety, all for 2 old people trying to fix a broken family. "Why are you really doing this?" The question escaped before Walter could stop it. Grizzly was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than Walter had heard it. "You know what the hardest part of war is? It's not the fighting. It's not even watching your buddies die. It's coming home and realizing the person you were before is gone, and the people you love don't know how to talk to the person you became." Walter waited. Behind the wheel, Axel's hands tightened slightly. "I came back from Afghanistan in 2012, Grizzly continued. 2 tours, 3 years total. Saw things that'll never leave my head. Did things I'll never talk about. When I got home, my son was 11. Smart kid, loved baseball, loved science class, loved his old man." He paused. "But his old man didn't come back. I did, but the version of me he remembered, that guy died in a firefight outside Kandahar." Dorothy's hand found Walter's. Squeezed. "I tried," Grizzly said. "God knows I tried. But I was angry all the time. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't sit still. Couldn't be in crowds without my hand going for a weapon that wasn't there. My wife, ex-wife now, she tried to help. But how do you help someone who won't admit they're broken?" His voice went hard. I started drinking, started fights, started pushing away everyone who gave a damn about me. And one day my son looked at me and said, "You're not my dad anymore." He was 14. The Suburban hit a patch of ice. Axel compensated smoothly, but the momentary slide made everyone tense. "Haven't seen him since," Grizzly finished. "He's 17 now, living with his mother in Seattle. I've got his number. I've typed out text messages 1,000 times, never hit send." He finally turned to look at Walter and Dorothy. "So yeah, I'm helping you, because maybe if you can cross the finish line, it means the rest of us aren't completely screwed." The radio crackled before anyone could respond. "Grizz, we got a problem. Lead truck here. There's a tree down across the highway, big one. We're not getting through without moving it." Grizzly lifted the radio. "How big?" 30 feet, maybe more. Pine tree looks like the snow load snapped it. "Can we go around?" "Negative. Ditches are too deep, too much snow. We move it or we turn back." Grizzly's face was stone. "We're not turning back. Convoy halt. Everyone out. We're clearing this tree." The Suburban slowed to a stop. Through the windshield, Walter could see the lead truck maybe 50 yards ahead, its hazard lights flashing. And beyond it, blocking the entire width of the highway, was a massive pine tree. "Stay in the vehicle," Grizzly ordered as he opened his door. "Keep warm. This might take a while." Walter watched through the window as the bikers gathered around the fallen tree. There were 12 of them, total 7 men, 5 women. They looked impossibly small against the tree's bulk. The trunk was easily 3 feet in diameter, and the branches spread out like skeletal fingers across the snow-covered asphalt. Grizzly was directing operations, pointing and gesturing. 2 of the bikers disappeared into the back of one of the trucks and returned with chainsaws. The sound of engines roaring to life cut through the morning air. "They're going to hurt themselves," Doc Matthews said. His breath fogged the window. "That tree weighs tons. Even cut into sections, they'll need heavy equipment to move it." But the bikers were already working. The chainsaws bit into wood, sending up sprays of sawdust. They worked in teams, one person cutting, while others stood ready with ropes and chains. When the first section separated from the trunk, 6 of them grabbed it and heaved muscles, straining boots, slipping on ice. The section moved. Inch by inch, they dragged it to the side of the road. Walter felt something tighten in his chest. These people didn't know him. Didn't know Dorothy. 48 hours ago, they'd been strangers. And now they were out there in single-digit temperatures moving a tree that could crush them if they made one wrong move, all because 2 old people needed to get to Montana. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. Dorothy's hand found his again. "Yes, you do. We both do. Everyone deserves a second chance, Walter, even us." The work continued. One section, then another, then another. The chainsaws screamed. The bikers shouted to each other, coordinating lifts, warning about weak ice, cursing when branches caught on the asphalt. Grizzly was in the thick of it, his massive frame straining as he helped lift sections that took 3 normal people to move. 30 minutes passed, then 45. Walter's coffee had gone cold. Dorothy had dozed off again, her breathing steady against his shoulder. Doc Matthews watched the work with the critical eye of someone cataloging future injuries. At the 50-minute mark, Grizzly's radio crackled to life. But it wasn't one of his people. The voice that came through was unfamiliar, rough with an edge of menace. "Well, well, Devil's Backbone out for a morning drive. Didn't your mother teach you to stay in your own yard?" Grizzly's hand went to the radio, but he didn't respond. His eyes scanned the tree line on both sides of the road. The voice continued. "We've been watching you clear that tree. Awful nice of you to do our road maintenance for us. But see, this is Iron Cross territory now, and you boys know you're not welcome here." Walter's heart started hammering. "Who is that?" Doc Matthews' face had gone pale. "Iron Cross MC, the rival club Grizzly mentioned. This is bad." Through the windshield, Walter saw the bikers stop working. They'd all heard the radio transmission. Hands moved toward waistbands, toward pockets. Preparing, Grizzly finally lifted the radio. His voice was calm, almost conversational. "Reaper, been a while." "Not long enough, Grizz. You want to tell me what you're doing rolling 6 vehicles through my territory at 7 in the morning? Just passing through, no trouble." "No trouble?" The voice Reaper laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. "You bring 12 Devil's Backbone into Iron Cross country, and you say no trouble. That's funny. That's real funny. We're on a timetable, Reaper. Got 2 civilians who need to get to Silver Falls. Medical situation. We clear this tree. We're gone. You never see us again. Silence on the radio. Then, two civilians. What, you're running a taxi service now? Something like that. Let me see them. Grizzly's jaw clenched. Not happening. Then you're not passing through. Simple as that. You want to cross Iron Cross territory. I see who you're carrying. Those are the terms. Walter saw Grizzly's hand tighten on the radio. The other bikers were tensing, spreading out slightly, creating defensive positions without seeming to move at all. Stand down, Reaper. This doesn't have to get ugly. Already is ugly, Grizz. You made it ugly when you crossed the line. Now either you show me your passengers, or you turn those vehicles around and crawl back to whatever hole you came from. Dorothy was awake now. She'd heard everything. Her hand clutched Walter so tightly it hurt. What's going to happen? Doc Matthews didn't answer. His eyes were locked on Grizzly. The big biker stood in the middle of the highway, snow falling around him, surrounded by his people. For a long moment he didn't move. Then he turned and looked directly at the Suburban, at Walter and Dorothy through the windshield. The message in his eyes was clear. Your call. Walter's mind raced. They could turn back, go to Copper Ridge, wait out the storm, try to make the journey another time. The safe choice, the smart choice. But Dorothy didn't have another time. The doctors had been clear weeks, maybe a month or two, if they were lucky. Every day they waited was a day closer to never. Walter made a decision that would change everything. He opened the Suburban's door and stepped out into the snow. Walter, no. Doc Matthews grabbed for him, but Walter was already moving. He walked toward Grizzly, his boots crunching in the snow, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. Every eye was on him. The Devil's Backbone bikers, the invisible watchers from Iron Cross, probably even God himself looking down and wondering what this crazy old man thought he was doing. Walter stopped next to Grizzly. I'm Walter Callahan, he called out to the empty forest. His voice cracked, but he pushed on. Korean War veteran. My wife Dorothy is in that vehicle. She's dying, cancer. We're trying to get to Silver Falls to see our grandson before it's too late. That's the whole story. No drugs, no weapons, no trouble. Just two old people trying to see family one last time. The forest was silent except for the wind. Then from the tree line, maybe 100 yards north, figures emerged. 8 motorcycles rolled out onto the highway, their riders dressed in black leather with different patches. Iron Cross MC. They moved in formation, engines rumbling, until they formed a line across the road. The rider in front, bigger than Grizzly, with a shaved head and a scar that ran from his eye to his jaw, killed his engine. He climbed off his bike and walked forward, his boots leaving deep prints in the snow. Reaper. He stopped 10 feet from Grizzly and Walter. His eyes, cold and calculating, swept over them both. Korean War, huh? What unit? Walter's voice was steady now. 7th Infantry Division. Fought at Chosin Reservoir. Something flickered in Reaper's scarred face. My grandfather fought at Chosin. Came home missing 3 toes and half his sanity. He looked at Grizzly. Your boy telling the truth. Every word, Grizzly said. Reaper studied them for another long moment. Then he turned and looked at the Suburban. At Dorothy's face visible through the window, pale and watching. Cancer, you said? Stage 4, Walter replied. Maybe a month left, maybe less. And you drove into a blizzard to see your grandson. We did. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Reaper's face was unreadable. Or the bravest. Haven't decided which. He looked back at Grizzly. You're really doing this, risking your people, your vehicles, for 2 strangers? Yeah. Why Buster? Grizzly's answer was simple. Because it's the right thing to do. Reaper's laugh was short and sharp. The right thing. Jesus Christ. He shook his head, then turned to his own people. You hear that Devil's Backbone found religion? They're doing the right thing. The mocking tone vanished as quickly as it had appeared. You finish clearing that tree. Then you get your civilians and you get the hell out of my territory. You've got Iron Cross escort to the county line. After that, you're on your own. Grizzly's eyes narrowed. Escort? You want to get to Silver Falls, fine, but you're doing it on our terms. My boys will ride ahead, clear any obstacles, make sure you don't hit trouble. Reaper's scarred face twisted into something that might have been a smile. Considerate professional courtesy, veteran to veteran. He walked back to his motorcycle without waiting for a response. Within seconds, the Iron Cross bikes roared to life. 4 of them moved ahead up the highway. The other 4 positioned themselves behind the convoy. Grizzly stood frozen, clearly not trusting what had just happened. Neither did Walter, But Dorothy's voice came from the Suburban, weak but clear through the open door. Are we moving or not? I've got a grandson waiting. That broke the spell. Grizzly's people went back to work on the tree with renewed energy. The final sections were cleared in 15 minutes. The convoy reformed now with an escort of Iron Cross bikes flanking them on both sides. As Walter climbed back into the Suburban, Grizzly caught his arm. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the stupidest. Still haven't decided which. Makes two of us, Walter said. They rolled out at 8:43 a.m. The Iron Cross bikes led the way, the riders communicating with Grizzly via radio to warn of obstacles ahead. The tension in the Suburban was thick enough to cut. I don't trust this, Axel muttered from the driver's seat. Iron Cross doesn't help anyone, especially not us. Doesn't matter if we trust them, Grizzly replied. Matters that they're getting us through their territory faster than we could manage alone. Doc Matthews was checking Dorothy's pulse again. Heart rate's elevated. She needs rest. She can rest in Silver Falls, Dorothy said. How much further? 120 miles, maybe 5 hours. Then let's stop talking and start driving. The convoy pushed forward into the white wilderness. The landscape was brutal pine forests weighed down with snow, frozen rivers cutting through valleys, mountains looming in the distance like sleeping giants. The highway was a ribbon of white cutting through it all, and they were the only vehicles on it. At mile marker 73, the Iron Cross lead bike pulled over. Its rider dismounted and walked back to Grizzly's window. It was Reaper again. Grizzly rolled down the window. Problem. County line's 2 miles ahead. After that, you're out of Iron Cross territory. You're on your own. Reaper paused. There's something you should know. Weather report says another storm's coming in this afternoon, bigger than the last one. If you're not in Silver Falls by 2 p.m., you're not making it at all. Grizzly checked his watch, 11:47 a.m. We'll make it. Maybe? Reaper looked past him at Walter and Dorothy. Hey, old man, you get to that grandson, you tell him his great-grandfather would have been proud. Anyone who fights that hard for family deserves to win. Before Walter could respond, Reaper was back on his bike. The Iron Cross escort pulled away, engines fading into the distance, leaving Devil's Backbone alone on the highway. Well, Axel said, that was unexpected. Keep driving, Grizzly ordered. We've got 2 hours to cover 80 miles. It's going to be tight. At 12:34 p.m., disaster struck. The lead truck radioed back with panic in the driver's voice. Rock slide ahead. The whole damn mountainside came down, the roads completely blocked. Grizzly's fist slammed against the dashboard. How bad? Bad, real bad. Rocks the size of cars, Grizz. Hundreds of them. There's no way through. Walter felt Dorothy sag against him. They'd come so far, fought through so much. And now this. Is there another route? He asked desperately. Axel was already pulling up a map on his phone. There's a logging road that connects back to the highway about 30 miles north. But it's probably not plowed. Might not even be passable. How long would it take? In good conditions, 40 minutes. Today could be 3 hours, could be never. Grizzly's radio crackled. It was the lead truck again. Grizz, we've got maybe 90 minutes before that next storm hits. If we're going to make a call, we need to make it now. Dorothy's voice was barely a whisper. We're not going to make it, are we? Walter couldn't answer. Because he didn't know. He looked at Grizzly, at this man who'd risked everything for strangers, and saw the same uncertainty in his eyes. Then Grizzly's expression changed, hardened. Everybody out, he ordered into the radio. We're moving these rocks by hand. Doc Matthews' head snapped around. Are you insane? Those rocks weigh hundreds of pounds. Some of them weigh tons. You'll kill yourselves. Then we die trying. Grizzly was already opening his door. But we don't quit. Not when we're this close. He stepped out into the snow, and one by one, every member of Devil's Backbone MC followed him. Walter watched through the Suburban's windshield as 12 bikers stood before a mountain of rock that should have required heavy equipment and a week's worth of work. Grizzly was already rolling up his sleeves, his breath visible in the frigid air. This is suicide, Doc Matthews said. One of those rocks shifts wrong, someone's getting crushed. Then we better not let them shift wrong. Dorothy's hand was on the door handle. I'm helping. The hell you are. Walter grabbed her arm. You can barely stand. Then I'll sit and move the small ones. Her eyes met his, and Walter saw the same fire that had convinced him to marry her 56 years ago. I'm not sitting in this truck while people risk their lives for me. Before Walter could argue, Dorothy was out the door. She stumbled in the snow, caught herself on the vehicle's frame, and started forward. Walter swore and went after her, Doc Matthews right behind him. The rock slide was worse up close. Boulders ranging from basketball size to small cars had tumbled down the mountainside, creating a wall 15 feet high and twice as wide. Some rocks were still settling, sending small cascades of gravel skittering down the pile. Grizzly was organizing his people with military precision. Cheryl, Tiny, you two start on the south side. Work the smaller rocks first, create a path. Axel, get the chains from the trucks. We'll use the vehicles to pull the big ones. Everyone else pair up. Nobody lifts alone. If a rock's too big, you call for help. Pride gets you killed. Walter reached Dorothy as she bent to pick up a rock the size of a bowling ball. Dot, please. I need to do this, Walter. Her voice was firm despite the tremor in her hands. These people are dying out here for us. The least I can do is move some rocks. She lifted the boulder. Her arms shook with the effort, but she carried it 10 feet and set it down beside the road. Then she went back for another. Walter felt something crack in his chest. His wife was dying. She could barely walk. And she was moving rocks because she refused to let others sacrifice without contributing. He picked up a rock himself. It was heavier than it looked, and his back screamed in protest, but he carried it to the edge of the road and dropped it. Went back for another. Around them, the Devil's Backbone MC was moving with coordinated intensity. Two bikers would lift a medium-sized boulder together, grunting with effort, shuffling their feet carefully on the icy ground. Tiny was using his massive frame to roll